All right,
All right. Oh, we started. I didn't
we
even see the
started.
countdown. Oh,
You were somewhere else there.
yeah, I was.
Yeah, you were on
Or
another
somewhere
plane.
better, somewhere nicer.
So nice.
And now I've been jerked back into this podcast.
We're recording an excellent podcast in sunny Norwich.
Well, we don't know that this one's going to be excellent.
No, and we don't know it's going to be sunny for the listener
True.
by the time it comes out.
True.
I just had a Rennie, and I don't know if it was off because it really didn't taste right.
On, off, Rennie.
I don't know. It was like
Lenny. What's the, I was going to say statute of limitations. What's the, like, sell by on a Rennie? How long? I feel like they're like a post-apocalyptic thing where there will be cockroaches and Rennies at the end of things. But
and if there are,
not.
it will taste like the one I just had. I've only got the foil thing, so I don't know. There's no, and it's not like taste best before or anything like that when it comes to Rennie. It's just does the job.
Did you just like raw dog the Rennie, or do you like you take it with something?
You don't take Rennie with something.
It's not like when you're trying to give something to a dog and you have to like squeeze it into their treats.
Yeah,
that's what we should have done with you.
Yeah, or like in the crevice of a Kit Kat.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or like crumbled it up and like sprinkled it over.
I have to do that with my dog. Do you?
Yeah. Well, my dog's not regularly sickly enough that we have to give her anything. To be honest, no offense to Olive. But,
yeah, I mean Olive is sickly enough. Not like flea stuff and shit like that, like the regular stuff.
Oh, like wait, like regular food?
No. So I think there's like a once a month flea thing we put in her food or something.
Oh yeah, no, we do the back of the neck liquid, which is horrible, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah, because then I forget and stroke her, and then it's all over my hands. It smells really strong.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's probably going to be there with the Rennie and the cockroaches at the end of the world then.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. What do you want to talk about this week?
So we're talking about email design, which honestly, when you suggested it, I was like, well, we've already done that. And then realized that actually we haven't at all. And that feels like a bit of a blind spot. So so that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. I went through the episodes, not as in I looked at all the titles, and I thought we started off with like these ticking off like the regular normal stuff. And then for a little bit, we went a bit meta.
Yeah.
And I think, we forgot to do some of these more kind of standard subjects.
Yeah. And I think we will have touched on design in previous newsletters. Probably I keep calling these podcasts newsletters.
I do the
tells
same.
You where my head's at.
Yeah.
In previous episodes, we probably did talk about design in patches, but this will be a dedicated episode where we'll talk about the do's and don'ts, not from a what looks best perspective, but from a what performs best perspective. And I think that's important to stress. Like, we are not designers whatsoever. So we're not coming at this from the angle of like, should your newsletter be red or blue? We're talking about the best practices when it comes to email marketing that are going to ensure your email gets to the maximum number of subscribers and can be enjoyed by the maximum number of people.
Nice. In fact, we probably touched on it when we did the accessibility episode.
Yeah, we would have done. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, nice. And there are offshoots of this topic that will probably need their own mini episodes, right? So if we talk about, I don't know, buttons.
Yeah.
Maybe headers and footers.
Headers and bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're really stuck for content, we can do a whole episode on footers.
Yeah, or just like dividers.
God,
easy one. That's an easy half an hour for us.
Yeah. Divides opinion for sure.
Oh, stop it. Save some gold for the episode.
Okay, sorry. Do you think you have a like a catch-all standard response when it comes to what makes a good newsletter design?
Yeah, I do actually. Simple, boring.
That's
my advice.
Your advice, okay.
Yeah, simple and boring is best. I have no appetite whatsoever for sexy looking emails unless there is a really clear and obvious way that it serves your ability to do what emails ought to do, which is engage with your audience and ultimately sell the thing you're trying to sell for most of our listeners, right? So there is a devil's advocate point here, which maybe we should get out of the way first, which is that if you sell a product that is heavily dependent on its visuals, there might be an argument that your newsletter should look should portray some of the rules that we'll talk about this episode. So, I don't know, maybe you're a design studio that specializes in like loud, elaborate paisley designs or something, or maybe or maybe you sell some sort of skincare product that is that where the bottle looks incredible and it always needs to be in every email because that's one of its main selling points. Or I don't know, I'm struggling to find examples because there are very few caveats to the rule of simple and boring in my view.
Yeah, maybe the way I'm kind of don't want to speak on your behalf here, but maybe the way that's what you mean there is, unless the design and imagery is doing some of the work that copy would be doing but better.
That's nice.
So the whole like picture speaks 1,000 words thing, right? So if there are things that you want to get across in your email that is done better with a picture than it is with words, then fine. Or if the images and the design are helping the copy.
Yeah, I do subscribe to that, and thank you. Yeah, because I think that's a more succinct way of putting it. But what I would stress here for the listener is that I'm not talking about, when we're talking about design, I'm not talking about images. I'm more than happy to use images in your newsletter. I would encourage images in your newsletter for the most part, and I think that generally, yeah, there will always be an opportunity to use an image that is more industrious than using words in place of that image. You can have lots of images in your email theoretically and still have a simple, boring design. I think the two are separate. So there's the design of the email, which is the sort of the fundamentals that are in every single email. And then there are image and copy, which are sort of separate to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Okay, I think one of the arguments against complex design for me is the amount of effort that it requires to build every single email you send out.
Yeah, such a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and it ends up becoming a blocker. So unless there is a really good reason for you to be investing that amount of time into rebuilding every single email because your design is so complex, that actually simplifying it down so it doesn't serve as a blocker to getting your newsletter out or your campaigns out more regularly. And I've got two examples for that, right? The first example is let's do e-commerce first. So if you're an e-commerce or a consumer-facing business, there is a tendency for those kind of businesses to use all image emails. Now, James, you'll have a lot to say on accessibility when it comes to using all image emails, because that's a good topic for you right now. For me, the point that I want to illustrate at this time is that by using an all image email, you are signing yourself up for having to redesign something every single time you send an email. So it's a really intense cycle of building these, designing them, building them, and sending them out. The plus points of that are that they tend to like look nicer to the reader, I would say, as from an objective standpoint, not from a performance standpoint. I would say they look better, and I think some of the reasons that they look better is because you have more freedom to use design elements, but also you keep your fonts, your brand fonts get protected, because if you're using a native text field when you're designing an email, it will get defaulted to a web safe font, so you don't get your brand font. So those are the plus points, but for me the negatives far outweigh the positives when it comes to that. So the email is less accessible, it's less likely to be performed properly across the range of devices and inboxes, and unless you're this kind of multi-site corporate huge company who has its own marketing and design function where you can start to churn these out multiple times a day, it's a blocker because you're asking too much of yourself to get these things built and sent out. And the other example is for B2B newsletters. Now, B2B newsletters are much more idea and thought leadership led. And those things are best imparted through copy. And I think we should be asking ourselves the question, how could I be more clever with my copy, before we ask ourselves, how can I be more clever with the design of my newsletter? And so, putting more effort into what you're saying as opposed to how it looks is far more important in B2B newsletters.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, and for B2C as well, in nearly every case, what you're saying is way more interesting, because there's a time and your place, right? For there's a time and a place for visuals when it comes to the product that you're selling. Like, if you're a successful e-commerce store, you're going to have an Instagram, you're going to have TikTok, you're going to be active on all of these channels. Email is not the place to email is not a visual platform, right? It is not the place to be sharing the best and brightest of the pictures and videos that you've taken of your product. It is the place to get the message across. It's the place where you build your brand. It's the place where you amplify promotions that you might be having on your website, and it's a place for sort of building up that brand loyalty and creating fans of your products as opposed to just consumers of your product. That's what emails are really good at. It is not good at showcasing how beautiful your product is. And so it needs to be viewed through the lens of the stuff I've mentioned, and not through the lens of, here's another way for us to show everyone how beautiful our product looks. Yeah. So just to be really clear with what Jamie's talking about there, because when you say all image emails, what we're talking about is not an email just full of loads of pictures. We're talking about opening a Canva file, for example, building your email on Canva. So writing text, creating text boxes, creating headers, inserting buttons, all of that stuff, and literally just exporting that Canva file as a PNG, putting it into an email and pressing send. And that's what Jamie's talking about there. So, they are, as Jamie's already alluded to, terrible for accessibility. And that's because email service providers get the image through any tool that someone might be using in order to read email text, to magnify email text, to read it out on loud, for example. Sometimes people with accessibility issues have to change the font. There are fonts, for example, that are more friendly for people that have dyslexia. So all of these tools that depend on the fact that they're able to extrapolate text from an email can't be used, because all those tools are getting is an image. So that's the main reason for why these are a problem from an accessibility point of view. They're also just awkward to zoom in on. You can't, if you want to include links in your email, it becomes a lot more difficult because you have to hyperlink the whole thing. So that also makes it challenging and often inflates your click rates because people accidentally click it. So there are all kinds of implications that these have, and there's a big deliverability implication as well. That being, if you're just sending an image as a brand, and let's say you're sending that to 10,000 people, that just looks super spammy. As far as the email service provider is concerned, Gmail, the bots that sit at the gates of Gmail in order to determine who comes in and who doesn't, are seeing that and thinking, oh, okay, well, this is just one big image. Like, that's the sort of thing that a spam sender might send. So it doesn't look good from their perspective either. They're not able to pick up on keywords in the email that might be a green light as far as these spam filters go. So it looks proper dodgy for them too.
Yeah, I think the other thing is it's less likely to be changed to be optimized for dark mode as well, because it'll be an image, right? And it won't, in dark mode, it won't change. So if your image has a white background, for instance, it won't change that white background of the image.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was like a native field, it would change it.
Yeah, exactly. And dark mode isn't just let's not forget, dark mode isn't just a preference. I mean, I use dark mode because I want to. Some people have photosensitivity that means dark mode is essential if they're going to consume digital content. So it's important.
Yeah, and if you're not sold on why accessibility is important, just go back and listen to our accessibility episode because it's more important than you think it might be.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so if we break down, should we break down what a design should include? You know,
Yeah.
if we think
Yeah.
about what a good one looks like, and if we think about, let's just take a newsletter for as an example in this instance.
Yeah, because there is an in between, right? Between like these all image emails that are fancy and have all of these fancy fonts and whatnot. And then the other extreme is the plain text email, right? The one you get from your work colleague or your grandma that's literally just like a letter. And most newsletters fall somewhere in between those two extremes. I would say I'm much more inclined to be closer to the plain text than I am the all image one. Um, it's hard to be too prescriptive when it comes to how a newsletter ought to look because so much of it is dependent on the content that you're sharing. If you send out an incredibly short newsletter every week, for example, then that is probably more conducive to a simple format because there isn't so much pressure on one individual email to carry huge amounts of information because you're emailing every week or maybe even more regularly, and so therefore you can get away with including less, and as such, your design ought to be more simplistic. If you're sending every month and maybe you need to cram in more information, there might be different sections in your newsletter, for example. There might be more onus on a design to ensure that there's clear distinction between those sections, between those pillars of content. So maybe if you're a business sending once a month, you have an intro, you might have a case study in there and testimonial, you might have some value that you're offering as well. You might also have a little section that talks about the kind of inner workings of the business, like the things that you've been up to or the events that you're attending. Maybe there's a blog post you want to share in there. So the more stuff that goes into a newsletter, I would say the more important it is that design works for you and not against you. So and of course then there are lots of offshoots here. So let's say for example that you are a software business and you've created a welcome flow where once somebody subscribes to your newsletter they get instructional newsletters on how to use different elements of your platform. That's a great way of using a newsletter, but because it's educational and because it involves presumably having to show and not just tell, there may be more of a need for images or videos. Generally, we don't encourage videos in newsletters. To be crystal clear, you cannot embed videos in newsletters. Well, technically you can, but Gmail won't allow them through, and lots of other email service providers won't allow them through. So instead, what you have to do when you're showing a video is link to a video that's hosted elsewhere. We generally don't encourage that, but there are exceptions. So, Jamie, I've waffled a bit there. What I want to get across here is that there are no hard and fast rules. It is very case by case, but I think fundamentally adhering to simplicity over sexiness is like the best place to start, almost indefinitely.
Yeah, and I have to be careful about how I word this because I don't want to get cancelled. Not that I'm big enough to be cancelled, but sometimes simplicity is sexy, and I'm using that word because you've just used it. So if I'm
Is
getting
that a
cancelled, so are
cancelable
you.
word?
Well, no, I think it just has like. Well, I don't want to start comparing newsletter design to the female form and sexiness and stuff like that.
Oh, I
Perhaps.
was firmly thinking of like Rod Stewart when I say
Okay,
sexy.
right, fine. Let's use Rod Stewart. So, what does Rod Stewart always wear? When I think
Like a
Rod Stewart,
sparkly suit.
yeah. So, okay, so let's say suit,
Mm.
right? I think if we look at a suit, is there anything that's kind of more simple and sexy than a suit?
Yeah, I see where you're driving at. I would say that actually a suit is probably one of the more complex things that I would wear in an average year. But I know what you're saying here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if we think
they're
about,
uniform.
yeah, if we okay, let's put it on the Met Gala red carpet, and we see someone that's just wearing like a suit versus someone who's dressed as a coconut or something. Maybe that's the comparison to draw
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
a suit is high impact, simple, looks good, timeless, etc. Coconut is maybe attention grabbing, but isn't taken seriously. I don't know. I'm kind
Mm.
of you trying to use a metaphor here that I'm not sure is actually working.
No, no, no. Yeah, I think you've nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other version is maybe like an LBD, little black dress.
Oh, sure.
If we
Yeah.
were gonna
Sorry.
feminize it,
I was like leg
um,
before wicket. That's
no.
not.
So I think what we want the design to do is to accentuate what's already there.
Mm.
I think it's where my beard is only making what's already there look all right, or where makeup is best used because it's kind of accentuating what's already there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And what's interesting, what you tend to find, and this is purely anecdotal, but I'd love to one day sort of build a portfolio of these, is that the businesses that are best at design, right? Design houses, uh, design agencies. The guy who used to be chief designer for Apple, the guy who literally designed the iPhone, like the chief designer behind that, now has a consultancy. You go on any of these institutions' websites, you subscribe to their newsletters, and you will find a common theme, which is that they are all stripped back and incredibly simple, much like the iPhone itself, right? And this is where people most frequently go wrong, is they think that good design equals elaborate design. Actually, it's the opposite. Good design equals a lack of noticeable design. If the design is noticeable on an email, you've done something seriously wrong. Ultimately,
Mm.
the design needs to be there to give the copy, the messaging, the important bit, a louder platform than it would have had on its own. And I would argue that actually the way that the world is going and the savviness of the average recipient uh, these days means that actually plain text emails are the essence of great design these days because they don't look like corporate emails. And if we're really boiling it down, what do we want our emails to achieve? Well, we want people to read them and we want people to engage with them, right? We want them to stick on the email for long enough that they're happy to read it all and they really absorb the message that we're sending them. I would argue that if the first thing you see when you click on an email is some huge picture or some like moving gif of like a woman in various poses wearing a coat, your brain now recognizes that immediately as like, this is from a brand. I'm not interested. This is spam, whatever. Unless you happen to you happen to love that brand already, and that's a different conversation about sender reputation. Um, People are becoming blind to ads, and this is why there's such an emerging trend in the paid ads world for creating ads that don't look like ads. We've gone from the era of beautifully shot video that was like heavily branded, heavily produced, really good looking, to now CEOs doing selfie videos in the middle of Trafalgar Square selling whatever they're selling, and those way outperforming the 100K budget ads. And I think apply that logic and take it to email. There was once a time where the best thing a brand could do is fill their emails with color and images and it looked really sleek and cool. And that is no longer the case. The less it looks like a branded email, I would argue that the more likely it is to perform.
Mm. And I would say it's we're not talking about, because I think it's more clever as well in order to create an email that performs well because the design is stripped back in a similar way in which getting a really powerful message across in fewer words is harder and more clever than it is getting it in more words. If we've got to be intentionally simple here. We've got to be intentionally creating a newsletter or designing an email that is achieving the goals that we want to achieve. So we're not just talking about being low effort. We're talking about intentionally making it simple and stripping it back, which is really important.
It's funnily enough one of the big challenges that we come across as an agency because there is, whether we like it or not, a bias towards really sexy email design, Rod Stewart email design, right? There is a moment, there is a big reveal moment that we get to enjoy as agency owners, where if we're working on a template for a client, we reveal that template, and um, that is often the moment of like real excitement, as opposed to reading the first draft of the newsletter, which is what we really care about. It tends to be that moment of like, oh yes, this is what my newsletter is going to look like. It looks so cool. And for us, it would feel harsh for some clients to reveal this just like plain text email. Imagine. But as the conversations that we have with our clients, and the ones that we're having with you listener now, is try it, give it a go. Don't necessarily default to plain text. Sometimes it can be really nice and really conducive to your efforts to create brand loyalty to have consistent visual themes amongst your newsletters. And the counter argument is that it can be, if your sender reputation is strong, it can be hugely beneficial if people know that it's from you the moment they open it. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on the kind of brand you are and the relationship you have with your subscribers. So definitely don't default to the plain text, but incorporate plain text. I would say try it, give it a go. Maybe you have an 8 email welcome flow, for example, and one of those emails is plain text. The rest are designed. One of them is plain text. Just see what happens to the metrics on that email compared to the others. Look at the open rates, but more importantly, look at the click rates, look at the engagement on those plain text emails. And I would wager that, just like a lot of things in email marketing, if we can capitalize on variety instead of hard and fast and set rules, if we can capitalize on variety, we will see significant differences in that plain text email compared to the others.
Nice. As we were recording this episode, I've just had a first concept through for a new client for their newsletter. It's like a, for something that we'll submit now, having built expectations around what their newsletter design should be. So we now have this first concept that we will send to them for feedback, which kind of is good timing, but it perfectly illustrates. And I'll talk you through this design. It's, it has the header, as in the header image, which is, very stripped out, very simple, very on brand. We have dividers, which are very clean, professional looking, because that's the kind of client that this is. Then we have, some kind of image frames, and then some feature blocks. So, some colored feature blocks which pull out something that's kind of short and like a little feature, like an idea or a trivial thing. And then we have this footer. And so, it's very clean, it's very simple, and that's fine. And I think sometimes what can look, if people might look at these kind of designs and they might think, okay, well, is that it? But that's fine, because this design concept doesn't have the copy in yet. It doesn't have the message that is the lifeblood of what this newsletter is going to be. And so that's so important. It's like, what is this going to say? And so if we say that design needs to carry the message, and the design serves as a backup function to the copy, if the copy's not in there, then we just have someone on stage playing bass, which isn't that interesting. But if you put vocals and a lead guitar on top of that, then it is interesting. So yeah, good timing, that was all. But
yeah, nice.
Should we hot take very quickly and then wrap this one up?
Let's hot take. Yeah,
cool. I went first last time.
Okay, yeah. So I'll go first, Jay. I'll buy you some time. So
Thanks.
so my hot take is, I actually ran a poll on LinkedIn, which, damn it, it's just refreshed. I can remember the results. So I ran a poll on LinkedIn about 4 months ago asking about this exact thing. I said, would you prefer to read an email that is completely plain, boring, no design whatsoever, or a super sexy, lovely, elaborate design? I was really hoping that the results would be, definitely the simple one, because, we at the Inbox Club have always been very pro simple and boring. Actually, the results were the opposite. So 45% wanted the simple and the boring, 55% wanted the elaborate and the interesting. Now, there are only 29 votes, so it was not the biggest survey that's ever been conducted when it comes to email design. But I think an interesting little glimpse into the difference between what people might think they want to read and what performs best from a email best practices perspective. And there is a gulf between those two things sometimes. Depending on the audience, depending on the product, there is a gulf between those two things. And the bravery in going for a simple design is being able to accept that that gulf exists and to pursue with a simple design nonetheless, because you know that it's going to get to more primary inboxes. All of your audience are going to be able to read it, not just those that don't suffer from visual impairments, for example. And it's going to carry your message in a much more powerful and effective way that actually encourages engagement. So this is an exercise in putting aside your vanity, I think, in a lot of cases. It's about accepting the fact that, yes, you have this beautiful brand, and yes, there are other places to show that off. The inbox is not that place.
Nice. I reckon you should run that poll again, and I think you should change the wording around it, because I think people will see plain and boring and they think, well, okay, well, obviously I don't want the one that's plain and boring. I think you should opt for, would you like something that's simpler, cleaner, and easier to read versus something that's elaborate, messy, and harder to navigate?
Yeah.
It's just some salesmanship, I guess. But,
yeah.
I was so interested in what you were saying there that I didn't even think about what my hot take would be.
Oh, you charmer.
But okay, my hot take is, I think if you've listened to this episode and you think, okay, well, I have a newsletter already and it's I send it out every week or every month, I think next month for your next edition, run a test. And I think my hot take is, I don't know, run that test. Run the test, do old design versus new design. And actually, you did that test, James, for a client very recently.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think run a test, 2 different designs, run that test a few times and then see what the results tell you. Because as always, it's very all well and good hearing 2 guys fuck about on a podcast, coming up with ideas and stuff. Another thing is to test these things in the real world and then act on the results. So I would do that. And then if I'm okay to include a quick call to action here, if you are not sure whether your design's any good or not, or which direction to take for a new design, etc., submit it to us and we'll have a look for you. And we'll give you some tips, free of charge. Just email us. We're party@theinbox.club.
Do you regret that email domain?
At theinbox.club.
No, so you've done that thing where you've taken, because I said domain, you've taken me literally. I meant the email address, party at.
Oh, do I regret it?
Yeah.
I don't regret it because I didn't put it in place. So,
but are you resentful that I did?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't mind party at the inbox pub.
Yeah.
Are you?
A little bit sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I wish I'd just gone something a bit more conventional, like hello or whatever. But
well, we can change it.
I probably had a few San Miguel's or something when I
yeah, maybe
when I put that in place.
You're sober now though, so maybe now's a good time to redo it.
I'm sober. Only occasionally. I'm sober at the moment.
Sober right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
For this episode.
Nice.
So we recorded this on a Monday in mid-April. You're probably getting this at the end of April if you're the listener.
Yeah, if you're like a diligent listener who listens to episodes as they come out.
Oh yeah, true.
Who knows? That's the thing.
It might be Christmas 25.
Yeah, it could be Christmas 2029.
Wow. Feliz Navidad.
I backed myself into a corner then by saying 2020, and then like realised I could only go 4 years ahead, and not, yeah. I wanted to be like 2089 or something. But
well, 4 years is a long time. Who knows what could have happened by then?
Yeah, true.
Anyway,
probably both be dead by then, Jay.
Do you think?
Well, I don't know.
Well, maybe. You won't be. You're sober now.
True.
You were heading that way at one point. But...
The way you're going, mate.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Guys. Bye.